Sarah Martinez moved quickly between the tables at Romano's Italian restaurant. Her feet hurt from standing all day, but she kept a smile on her face. The dinner rush was always busy, and tonight was no different. People talked and laughed while they ate their pasta and pizza. The sound of forks hitting plates mixed with conversations about work and family. She carried 3 plates on her left arm and held a water pitcher in her right hand. Table 5 needed more bread. Table 8 wanted extra cheese. Table 12 had an old man sitting alone, reading a book while he ate. Sarah had served him before. He always ordered the same thing, chicken parmesan with a side salad and black coffee. The restaurant was full of warm yellow light from the lamps on each table. Red and white checkered tablecloths covered every surface. Pictures of Italy hung on the walls, showing the Colosseum and gondolas in Venice. The smell of garlic and tomato sauce filled the air. Sarah walked to the kitchen window and picked up 2 more orders. Her manager, Tony, was shouting at the cooks to hurry up. The dishwasher was making noise with the plates and glasses. Everything was loud and busy, just like every other Friday night. In the corner of the restaurant sat an old piano. It was brown and scratched. Dust covered the top, and someone had put a fake plant on it. The bench was pushed to one side. Sarah looked at it every time she walked by. She wondered if it still worked. She wondered if anyone remembered it was there. Sarah had been working at Romano's for 8 months. She started right after her mother got sick. The doctors said her mother had cancer. The treatment was very expensive. Sarah's father had left when she was 10, so it was just her and her mother now. Sarah worked 2 jobs to pay for the medicine and doctor visits. During the day, she cleaned offices downtown. At night, she served food at Romano's. She was always tired, but she had to keep working. Her mother needed her. There was no one else to help. Before her mother got sick, Sarah had different dreams. She wanted to study music. She had played piano since she was 7 years old. Her music teacher in high school said she was very good. The teacher helped her apply to music schools. Sarah got accepted to 3 different colleges, but she could not afford to go. Now those dreams seemed very far away. Sarah kept a small keyboard in her tiny apartment. When she came home late at night, she would play quietly so the neighbors would not complain. The keyboard was old and some keys did not work, but it was all she had. As Sarah brought the old man his coffee, she noticed him watching her. His eyes were kind and gentle. He had gray hair and wore a clean sweater. He always left a good tip and said thank you when she brought his food. "Excuse me, miss," the old man said as Sarah set down his cup. "Yes, sir." "Do you need anything else?" Sarah asked. The man looked toward the corner where the piano sat. "Does anyone ever play that piano?" Sarah followed his eyes to the dusty instrument. "Oh, that old thing? No, sir. The owner says it's broken. Nobody has played it in years." The old man nodded slowly. "That's too bad. It looks like it was beautiful once," Sarah agreed. "I think so too. I play piano a little bit. Sometimes I wonder what it would sound like." "You play piano?" the old man asked. His voice sounded interested. Sarah felt her face get warm. She did not usually tell customers about herself. "A little bit. Not very well." "I'm sure you're better than you think," the old man said with a smile. Sarah had to go help other tables, but she kept thinking about what the man said. She wondered why he asked about the piano. Most people did not even notice it was there. The restaurant stayed busy for the next 2 hours. Sarah's feet hurt more with each step. Her back was sore from carrying heavy trays. But she kept working. She thought about her mother at home, probably sleeping. The medicine made her very tired. Sarah's mother used to love listening to her play piano. When Sarah was in high school, she would play concerts and her mother would sit in the front row. Her mother would clap louder than anyone else. She would tell all her friends that Sarah was going to be a famous musician someday. Now Sarah's mother was too weak to leave the house most days. Sarah played for her sometimes on the old keyboard, but it was not the same. The sound was thin and electronic, nothing like a real piano. As the evening went on, Sarah noticed the old man was still there. He had finished eating, but he ordered another coffee. He kept looking around the restaurant, watching the other customers. Sometimes his eyes would go back to the piano in the corner. Sarah wondered what he was thinking about. He seemed different from other customers. Most people ate quickly and left. This man seemed to be waiting for something. The clock on the wall showed 9:30. The restaurant would close at 10. Sarah started cleaning the empty tables and putting chairs up. Soon it would be time to go home. Another long day would be over. but something felt different tonight. Sarah could not explain what it was. Maybe it was the way the old man kept looking at the piano. Maybe it was the way he smiled when she told him she played music. Something was going to happen. Sarah could feel it in the air. The old man finished his second cup of coffee and called Sarah over to his table. She walked over with the check, expecting him to pay and leave like most customers did. "Thank you for the wonderful service tonight," he said. "My name is William Chen. I used to be a music teacher." Sarah smiled politely. "That's nice, Mr. Chen. I'm Sarah." "Sarah, I have been watching you work tonight. You move with grace like a dancer. And I noticed something else." He paused and looked at her carefully. "You hum while you work." Sarah felt embarrassed. She did not know she hummed loud enough for people to hear. "I'm sorry if I was bothering you." No, Mr. Chen said quickly. "You are not bothering me at all. The songs you hum are not simple tunes. I heard pieces by Mozart and Chopin. That tells me you know classical music very well." Sarah was surprised. Most people did not know classical music well enough to recognize the pieces she hummed. "You have good ears, Mr. Chen. 40 years of teaching music will do that," he said with a laugh. "Tell me, Sarah, where did you learn to play piano?" Sarah sat down in the chair across from him. The restaurant was almost empty now. Only 2 other tables had customers. "I started when I was 7. My mother saved money to pay for lessons. I played all through school." "And now?" Mr. Chen asked. Sarah's face became sad. "Now I work to pay for my mother's medical bills. She has cancer. Piano lessons are not important anymore." Mr. Chen nodded with understanding. "I'm sorry to hear about your mother, but music is always important, Sarah. It feeds the soul." Sarah looked toward the piano in the corner. "I still play sometimes. I have a small keyboard at home, but it's not the same as a real piano." Mr. Chen followed her eyes to the old instrument. "What about that piano? Does it really not work?" "Mr. Romano says it's broken. The keys stick and it sounds terrible. He keeps meaning to get rid of it, but he never does." Mr. Chen was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised Sarah. "Would you try playing it for me?" Sarah laughed. "Mr. Chen, I told you it's broken. And besides, I'm working. I can't just start playing piano in the middle of a restaurant." "The restaurant is almost empty," Mr. Chen said, "and sometimes broken things work better than we think they will." Sarah looked around. Tony was in the kitchen counting money. The last few customers were finishing their meals. She had already cleaned most of the tables. "I don't know," Sarah said. "What if it makes awful sounds? What if people complain? What if it sounds beautiful?" Mr. Chen asked. "What if people love it?" There was something about the way he asked that made Sarah think. This old man seemed to know something she did not. His eyes were bright and hopeful. "Why do you want me to play?" Sarah asked. Mr. Chen smiled. "Because I think you have a gift, Sarah, and gifts should not be hidden away." Sarah felt her heart beating faster. She had not played a real piano in months. What if she had forgotten how? What if her fingers were too stiff from working so much? "I'm scared," Sarah said quietly. "That's normal," Mr. Chen said. "All musicians feel scared before they perform, but the music is stronger than the fear." Sarah looked at the piano again. It did look sad sitting there with dust on top and a fake plant hiding its beauty. Maybe it wanted to make music again. Maybe it was tired of being silent. "What should I play?" Sarah asked. "Play whatever speaks to your heart," Mr. Chen said. Sarah stood up slowly. Her legs felt shaky. She walked toward the piano like she was walking in a dream. Other customers started to notice. They watched her with curious eyes. Tony came out of the kitchen. "Sarah, what are you doing?" "The gentleman asked me to play something," Sarah said, pointing to Mr. Chen. Tony looked confused. "But that piano doesn't work right." "We'll see," Sarah said. She reached the piano and lifted the cover that protected the keys. The keys were yellow with age, but they looked like they had been beautiful once. Sarah touched one key gently. It made a soft sound that was not as bad as she expected. "Mr. Chen had moved to a table closer to the piano. Other customers turned their chairs to watch. Even the cook came out of the kitchen to see what was happening. Sarah sat down on the bench. It was the right height. Her feet could reach the pedals. She placed her hands on the keys and took a deep breath. She thought about her mother sleeping at home. She thought about all the music lessons when she was young. She thought about the dreams she had to put away. All of those feelings went into her fingers. Sarah began to play a piece by Chopin that her teacher had taught her in high school. It was called Nocturne in E-flat major. It was one of her favorite pieces because it was both sad and beautiful at the same time. The first notes came out clear and sweet. The piano was not broken after all. It just needed someone to play it with love. As Sarah played, she forgot about everything else. She forgot about her tired feet and sore back. She forgot about the customers watching her. She forgot about being scared. The music filled the restaurant like warm light. Every note was perfect. Sarah's fingers remembered exactly what to do. It was like the piano had been waiting for her all this time. Mr. Chen sat back in his chair with tears in his eyes. He had been right about this young woman. She was not just good at playing piano, she was extraordinary. Sarah's fingers moved across the piano keys like they had a mind of their own. The melody of Chopin's Nocturne flowed through the restaurant, soft and gentle at first, then growing stronger with each measure. She had played this piece hundreds of times on her small keyboard at home, but it had never sounded like this. The old piano responded to her touch like it had been sleeping and was finally waking up. Each key she pressed created a rich, warm sound that filled the room. The instrument was not broken at all. It had just been waiting for the right person to bring it back to life. Around the restaurant, something magical was happening. The couple at table 3 had stopped eating their dessert. The man put down his spoon and reached across to hold his wife's hand. The woman's eyes were getting wet with tears as she listened to the beautiful music. At table 7, a family with 2 young children had gone completely quiet. The little girl, who had been coloring on her placemat, put down her crayon and stared at Sarah with wide eyes. The boy, who had been playing with his food, sat still for the first time all evening. Tony stood by the kitchen door with his mouth open. He had owned this restaurant for 15 years, and nothing like this had ever happened. He had always thought the piano was just taking up space. Now he realized he had been wrong. Even the cook, Maria, had come out to listen. She wiped her hands on her apron and leaned against the wall. Maria had worked in restaurants her whole life, but she had never heard anything so beautiful during dinner service. Sarah was lost in the music. Her fingers knew exactly where to go. The piece was telling a story, and she was the storyteller. It spoke of longing and sadness, but also of hope and beauty. It was the story of her own life, the struggles and the dreams that she carried in her heart. As she played, Sarah thought about her mother. She remembered when she was 12 years old and had played this same piece at a school concert. Her mother had been so proud. After the show, her mother had hugged her and said, "Sarah, you have magic in your fingers." Now, as the music flowed through Romano's restaurant, Sarah felt that magic again. She had not lost it, even though she had been too busy and too tired to feel it for so long. Mr. Chen watched from his table with a knowing smile. He had been teaching music for 40 years, and he could recognize real talent when he heard it. This young woman was not just playing notes on a piano. She was speaking a language that went straight to the heart. The other customers in the restaurant had stopped all their conversations. Forks and knives were set down quietly on plates. Even the air conditioning seemed to hum more softly, as if it did not want to disturb the music. A businessman who had been talking loudly on his phone hung up and put the phone in his pocket. An elderly woman who had been reading a book closed it and set it on the table. A young couple who had been arguing about something forgot their disagreement and listened together. Sarah reached the most beautiful part of the piece, where the melody soared high and then came back down like a bird landing on a branch. Her left hand played the bass notes that supported the melody, while her right hand created the sweet, singing line that made people want to cry. The piano seemed to grow stronger with each note. It was like the instrument had been holding its breath for years, and now it could finally exhale. The sound was rich and full, nothing like the broken instrument that Mr. Romano had described. As Sarah played, she felt all the emotions she had been keeping inside for months. The worry about her mother, the sadness about giving up her dreams, the tiredness from working so many hours. All of these feelings went into the music, and somehow the music made them beautiful instead of painful. Tony looked around his restaurant and could not believe what he was seeing. His customers were not just listening to the music. They were being changed by it. He saw people wiping tears from their eyes. He saw couples holding hands. He saw strangers looking at each other and smiling. The little girl at table 7 got up from her chair and walked closer to the piano. Her parents started to stop her, but then they decided to let her go. She stood a few feet away from Sarah, watching her fingers dance across the keys with amazement. Mr. Chen felt his heart beating faster as he listened. He had been right to ask Sarah to play. This was exactly what he had hoped would happen, but even he was surprised by how beautiful her playing was. She was better than he had expected. Much better. As the piece continued, more people in the restaurant turned their chairs to face the piano. They wanted to see the person who was creating this magic. They saw a young woman with tired eyes and work clothes, but when she played, she looked like an angel. Sarah reached the ending of the piece where the melody became soft and gentle again, like a whisper or a lullaby. Her fingers slowed down, and each note hung in the air for a moment before the next one came. The music was saying goodbye, but it was a sweet goodbye, full of love and hope. When Sarah played the final chord, she held it until the sound faded completely away. Then she lifted her hands from the keys and sat very still. The restaurant was silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. It was like the whole world had stopped to listen to that last beautiful note disappear into the air. Sarah looked up and saw all the faces watching her. For a moment she felt scared. What had she done? What would people think? But then she saw the expressions on their faces, and she knew that something wonderful had just happened. The silence that followed Sarah's performance was unlike anything anyone in Romano's restaurant had ever experienced. It was not the uncomfortable quiet that sometimes happens when people do not know what to say. This was a sacred silence, the kind that comes after something beautiful and perfect has touched your soul. Sarah sat at the piano bench, her hands still resting on the keys. She could feel her heart beating fast in her chest. The last note of the Chopin piece seemed to hang in the air like a butterfly that did not want to land. She was afraid to move, afraid to break whatever spell the music had created. Around the restaurant, people sat frozen in their chairs. The businessman who had been so busy with his phone calls now had tears running down his cheeks. He did not even try to wipe them away. He just sat there remembering something from long ago that the music had brought back to life. The elderly woman who had been reading alone at her corner table was holding her book against her chest like it was something precious. Her eyes were closed and she was smiling the kind of smile that comes from deep inside. The music had reminded her of her late husband, who used to play piano for her on Sunday mornings. The young couple who had been arguing earlier were now holding hands across their table. The music had made them remember why they fell in love in the first place. Their argument seemed silly now, like something that happened to different people in a different world. Tony stood by the kitchen door, completely amazed. In 15 years of running this restaurant, he had seen birthday parties and anniversary celebrations. He had watched people propose marriage and celebrate graduations, but he had never seen anything that affected people the way Sarah's music had. The little girl who had moved closer to the piano was still standing there, staring at Sarah with wide, wondering eyes. She was only 6 years old, but she understood that she had just heard something magical. She would remember this moment for the rest of her life. Maria, the cook, was crying quietly as she leaned against the wall. The music had reminded her of her grandmother in Italy, who used to sing while she cooked. Maria had not thought about her grandmother in years, but now she could almost smell the bread baking in her grandmother's kitchen. Mr. Chen sat at his table, watching Sarah with great emotion in his eyes. He had spent his whole life around music and musicians, but it had been years since he had heard playing that moved him this deeply. Sarah was not just talented. She was gifted in a way that only happened once in a generation. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 seconds. Everyone in the restaurant seemed to be holding their breath, not wanting to be the first person to speak and break the magic. Finally, it was the little girl who broke the silence. She started clapping her small hands together, slowly at first, then faster. The sound of her applause seemed to wake everyone else up from their trance. One by one, the other customers began to clap. But this was not ordinary applause. This was the kind of clapping that comes from the heart, when people want to show how much something has meant to them. The businessman stood up and clapped with his whole body, nodding his head and wiping his eyes. The elderly woman put down her book and clapped with tears streaming down her face. The young couple clapped together, their hands meeting in the space between them. Soon everyone in the restaurant was on their feet, clapping and cheering. Tony started clapping too, and then Maria joined in from the kitchen. Even the dishwasher, who had come out to see what was happening, was applauding with soapy hands. The sound of the applause filled the restaurant like thunder, but it was happy thunder, the kind that comes after a beautiful storm. People were not just clapping for Sarah's playing. They were clapping for the way the music had made them feel. They were clapping for memories that had come back to life. They were clapping for beauty in a world that sometimes seemed to have forgotten what beauty was. Sarah sat at the piano, overwhelmed by the response. She had never performed for an audience like this before. Her school concerts had been nice, but this was different. These people were not clapping because they had to. They were clapping because they wanted to, because something inside them had been awakened. As the applause continued, Sarah looked at Mr. Chen. He was clapping too, but he was also watching her with a look she could not quite understand. It was like he was seeing something in her that she did not know was there. The applause went on for several minutes. People did not want it to stop because they did not want the magic to end. When it finally began to die down, there was still that special feeling in the air, like something important had just happened. The businessman walked over to Sarah. "Miss," he said, "that was the most beautiful thing I have heard in years." "Thank you." The elderly woman came over too. "My dear," she said, taking Sarah's hand, "you have a gift from God. Never let anyone tell you different." More people approached the piano. They all wanted to say something to Sarah, to thank her for the music she had shared. They spoke in quiet, respectful voices like they were in a church. "Where did you learn to play like that?" asked the mother of the little girl. "Have you ever performed professionally?" asked another man. "Will you play here again?" asked the young woman from the couple. Sarah felt embarrassed by all the attention. "I just work here," she said quietly. "I'm not a real musician." But Mr. Chen, who had been listening to all the comments, stood up and walked to the piano. "Sarah," he said in a voice that everyone could hear, "you are more of a musician than many people who play in concert halls. What you just did was not just playing notes. You made music speak to people's hearts." The restaurant grew quiet again as people listened to Mr. Chen's words. There was something about the way he spoke that made everyone pay attention. "Tell me, Sarah," Mr. Chen said, "how long have you been hiding this talent?" Sarah felt her cheeks turn red as Mr. Chen asked his question. All the customers were still standing around the piano, waiting for her answer. She had never been the center of attention like this before, and it made her feel nervous. "I'm not hiding anything," Sarah said quietly. "I just play for myself sometimes." "It's not important." "Not important?" Mr. Chen repeated, shaking his head. "Sarah, what you just did was very important. You brought joy to everyone in this room. That is what real musicians do." The businessman who had cried during her performance stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said to Mr. Chen. "I couldn't help but notice how you're talking about music. Are you a musician yourself?" Mr. Chen smiled. "I was a music teacher for many years. I taught at the conservatory downtown." Several people in the restaurant looked at each other with surprise. The conservatory was the most respected music school in the city. Only the best students could get in, and only the best teachers worked there. "You taught at the conservatory?" Tony asked, walking over from where he had been standing. "That's a very important place." "Yes," Mr. Chen said. "I taught there for 35 years. I've worked with many talented young musicians over the years." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. A teacher from the conservatory had just heard her play. She did not know if that was good or bad. The elderly woman who had been reading alone spoke up. "Professor Chen, is that you? I thought you looked familiar. My granddaughter Sarah took lessons from you 5 years ago." "Sarah Williams?" Mr. Chen's eyes lit up. "Mrs. Williams. Yes, I remember your granddaughter well. How is she doing with her music?" "She's playing with the city orchestra now," Mrs. Williams said proudly. "She always said you were the best teacher she ever had." The people in the restaurant began to understand that Mr. Chen was not just any music teacher. He was someone important in the music world. They looked at Sarah with new interest, wondering what this meant for her. Mr. Chen turned back to Sarah. "Now I have a confession to make. Sarah, I did not come to this restaurant tonight by accident." Sarah felt confused. "What do you mean?" "Mrs. Henderson, who comes here every Tuesday, called me last week. She told me about a young waitress who hummed classical music while she worked. She said this waitress sometimes played the old piano during her breaks when she thought no one was watching. Sarah looked around the restaurant until she saw Mrs. Henderson sitting at table 9. The older woman smiled and waved at her. Sarah remembered her now, the nice lady who always ordered soup and left big tips. "You were watching me?" Sarah asked. "Mrs. Henderson thought you had talent," Mr. Chen continued. "She asked me to come and listen to you. So I've been coming here once a week for the past month, hoping to hear you play." Sarah felt embarrassed. "I only played during breaks a few times. I didn't think anyone noticed." "Mrs. Henderson noticed," Mr. Chen said, "and she was right to call me. What I just heard was extraordinary." Tony looked confused. "Wait, you mean Sarah really can play? I thought the piano was broken." "The piano works fine," Mr. Chen said. "It just needed someone with skill to play it properly." The young couple from earlier approached the group. "Excuse me," the woman said, "but what exactly is happening here? This feels like something important." Mr. Chen looked at Sarah, then at all the people gathered around. "What's happening is that we have just discovered a remarkable talent. Sarah doesn't just play piano well. She plays with the kind of emotion and skill that cannot be taught. It's a gift." Sarah felt overwhelmed. "Mr. Chen, I appreciate what you're saying, but I'm not a professional musician. I'm just a waitress who plays piano sometimes." "Sarah," Mr. Chen said gently, "may I ask you something personal? Why are you working as a waitress instead of studying music?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She had not talked about this with anyone except her mother. "My mother is sick. She has cancer. I have to work to pay for her treatment. Music school costs too much money." The restaurant became very quiet. People's faces showed sympathy and understanding. Many of them had their own struggles with money and family problems. Mrs. Williams stepped forward and took Sarah's hand. "My dear, I had no idea. Your playing tonight was so beautiful. It's terrible that you can't pursue your dreams." "That's exactly why I'm here," Mr. Chen said, his voice becoming more serious. "Sarah, I need to tell you something else. I'm not just a retired music teacher. I also work with the Henderson Foundation." Sarah had never heard of the Henderson Foundation, but several other people in the restaurant seemed to recognize the name. They looked at Mr. Chen with new interest. "The Henderson Foundation provides scholarships to talented musicians who face financial difficulties," Mr. Chen explained. "We help students pay for music school and living expenses while they study." Sarah felt her heart stop beating for a moment. "A scholarship?" "Yes," Mr. Chen said. "But we only give scholarships to musicians who have exceptional talent and who have faced real hardship in their lives. From what I heard tonight and from what I know about your situation, you would be exactly the kind of student we want to help." The businessman who had been listening stepped forward. "Excuse me, but I know about the Henderson Foundation. They're very selective. They only choose 2 or 3 students each year." "That's correct," Mr. Chen said. "We look for students who have both technical skill and emotional depth." Sarah has both. Sarah felt dizzy. This could not be real. Things like this did not happen to people like her. "Mr. Chen, I don't understand. Are you saying you want to give me a scholarship?" "I'm saying I want to help you apply," Mr. Chen said. "The final decision would be made by a committee, but based on what I heard tonight, I think you have an excellent chance." Tony looked at Sarah with amazement. "Sarah, do you realize what this means? You could go to music school." Sarah started to cry. Not sad tears, but tears of hope and confusion and fear all mixed together. "But what about my mother? I can't stop working. She needs me." Mr. Chen smiled kindly. "The foundation also provides work-study positions. You could teach younger students while you study. It would give you income to help with your mother's care." All around the restaurant, people were smiling and wiping their own eyes. They had come for dinner and accidentally become part of something magical. They were watching someone's life change right in front of them. Sarah could not stop crying. She covered her face with her hands as all the emotions she had been holding inside for months came pouring out. The customers around the piano watched her with kind, understanding faces. They could see that this young woman had been carrying a heavy burden for a long time. Mrs. Williams put her arm around Sarah's shoulders. "It's okay, dear. Let it out. This is good news." "I don't know what to say," Sarah whispered through her tears. "This doesn't feel real." Mr. Chen waited patiently for Sarah to calm down. He had seen this reaction before when he told students about scholarship opportunities. It was hard for young people to believe that their dreams could actually come true. "Sarah," he said gently, "I know this is overwhelming, but I want you to understand something. The Henderson Foundation was created specifically for situations like yours. The woman who started it, Mrs. Elena Henderson, was also a talented musician who almost gave up her dreams because of money problems." The businessman in the group looked interested. "I've heard that story. Mrs. Henderson became a famous pianist, didn't she?" "Yes," Mr. Chen nodded. "But she almost never got the chance. When she was 20, her father lost his job and she had to quit music school to work in a factory. A kind teacher helped her get a scholarship and she never forgot what that meant to her life." Sarah wiped her eyes and looked up. "What happened to her?" "She went on to have a wonderful career as a concert pianist," Mr. Chen said. "She played with orchestras all over the world. When she retired, she used her money to create the foundation. She wanted to make sure that other young musicians would never have to give up their dreams because of money." Tony, who had been listening to everything, shook his head in amazement. "Sarah, I can't believe this is happening in my restaurant. This is like something from a movie." The young couple who had been arguing earlier came closer. "We're sorry to interrupt," the woman said, "but we wanted to say something. We've been going through some tough times lately, and we were fighting when we came in tonight. But your music reminded us what's really important." "Thank you for that." Her boyfriend nodded. "We want you to know that whatever happens with this scholarship, you've already made a difference in people's lives tonight." More customers began to share their feelings. The elderly woman talked about how the music reminded her of her late husband. The businessman explained that he had not thought about his childhood piano lessons in 20 years, but now he wanted to start playing again. Sarah listened to all these stories with wonder. She had just been trying to play a song that she loved. She had no idea that music could affect people so deeply. "Mr. Chen," she said finally, "what would I have to do to apply for this scholarship?" Mr. Chen smiled. "The first step would be an audition. You would need to prepare 3 pieces of different styles. 1 classical piece, 1 romantic piece like the Chopin you just played, and 1 piece of your own choice." "When would this audition happen?" Sarah asked. "The next round of auditions is in 6 weeks, Mr. Chen said. That gives you time to prepare." Sarah felt scared again. 6 weeks? But I haven't had proper lessons in years. I only have my little keyboard at home. "How can I prepare for an audition in 6 weeks? "That's where I come in," Mr. Chen said. "If you're willing, I would like to give you lessons to help you prepare. No charge, of course. I have a piano at my house and we could practice there." Tony stepped forward. "And Sarah, I want to help too. You can have flexible hours here so you can practice. Maybe you could even practice on this piano after we close." Sarah looked around at all the faces surrounding her. These people, most of whom had been strangers an hour ago, were now offering to help her pursue her dreams. It felt like a miracle. "There's something else," Mr. Chen said. "The scholarship doesn't just pay for school. It also includes a small monthly allowance for living expenses. And there's a work-study program where you would teach piano to children. That job pays enough to help with family expenses." "You mean I could still help my mother?" Sarah asked. "Absolutely," Mr. Chen said. "In fact, the foundation believes that students perform better when they don't have to worry about basic needs. We want you to focus on your music, not on money." Mrs. Henderson, who had been quietly listening from her table, came over to join the group. "Sarah, dear, I hope you don't mind that I called Professor Chen. I've been watching you for months and I could tell you had something special." Sarah hugged the older woman. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. I don't know how to thank you." "You already have, dear. The music you played tonight was thanks enough." The little girl who had been watching everything tugged on her mother's dress. "Mommy, is the nice lady going to be famous?" Her mother smiled. "I don't know, sweetheart, but she's going to have a chance to try." Mr. Chen looked at his watch. "Sarah, I know this is a lot to think about. You don't have to decide anything right now, but if you're interested, I could come back tomorrow and we could talk more about the details." Sarah nodded quickly. "Yes, please. I want to try. I'm scared, but I want to try." The applause started again, but this time it was different. People were not just clapping for the music they had heard. They were clapping for hope. They were clapping for dreams that refused to die. They were clapping for the idea that sometimes, in the most unexpected places, magic really does happen. As the applause died down, people began to return to their tables or prepare to leave. But the feeling in the restaurant had changed forever. Everyone who was there that night would remember it for the rest of their lives. Sarah sat back down at the piano bench and touched the keys softly. 6 weeks ago, this piano had been just an old piece of furniture covered with dust. Now it was the instrument that might change her entire life. "Thank you," she whispered to the piano. "Thank you for not being broken after all." 6 months later, Sarah stood backstage at the city's main concert hall, wearing a long black dress that made her feel like a real musician. Her hands were shaking, but it was good shaking, the kind that comes from excitement, not fear. Tonight was her first official recital as a student at the conservatory. In just a few minutes, she would walk onto the stage and play for an audience of 300 people. But she was not scared anymore. She was ready. The scholarship audition had gone even better than Mr. Chen had hoped. Sarah had played beautifully, and the committee had been so impressed that they offered her a full scholarship on the spot. She had cried tears of joy that day, just like she had cried that first night at Romano's restaurant. The past 6 months had been the busiest and happiest of Sarah's life. She took classes at the conservatory during the day and taught piano to young children in the evenings. The work-study program gave her enough money to help with her mother's medical bills, and the scholarship covered all her school expenses. Best of all, her mother was getting better. The cancer treatment was working, and the doctors were very hopeful. Sarah's mother had been able to come to several of her practice sessions, and hearing her daughter play again had given her strength to keep fighting. "Sarah, you're on in 5 minutes," said the stage manager, a kind woman named Linda who had been helping nervous students for 20 years. "Thank you," Sarah said, taking a deep breath. She walked to the side of the stage and peeked through the curtain at the audience. The concert hall was almost full. She could see Mr. Chen sitting in the third row with a proud smile on his face. Next to him sat Mrs. Henderson, who had become like a grandmother to Sarah. In the front row, Sarah saw the most important person of all, her mother. Sarah's mother looked healthy and strong, nothing like the weak, tired woman she had been 6 months ago. She was wearing her best dress and had tears of pride already forming in her eyes. But the biggest surprise was seeing some familiar faces from Romano's restaurant. Tony had closed the restaurant early so he and his staff could come to the concert. Maria the cook was there, wearing a beautiful dress that Sarah had never seen before. Even some of the customers from that special night had come. The businessman who had cried during her performance at the restaurant was sitting with his wife. The elderly woman who had been reading alone was there with her granddaughter. The young couple who had been arguing was holding hands and smiling. Sarah felt overwhelmed by how many people had come to support her. 6 months ago, she had been just a tired waitress with impossible dreams. Now she was a scholarship student about to perform her first real concert. "Places, everyone," Linda announced to the other students who were performing tonight. Sarah was playing third in the program. She had chosen the same Chopin nocturne that she had played that first night at Romano's, along with 2 other pieces she had learned since starting school. As she waited for her turn, Sarah thought about all the changes in her life. She now lived in a small apartment near the conservatory, but she still worked part-time at Romano's on weekends. Tony had kept the old piano tuned and in perfect condition, and sometimes Sarah would play for the dinner customers. The restaurant had become famous in the neighborhood as the place where the miracle happened. People would come hoping to hear Sarah play, and Tony loved telling the story of that magical night. Mr. Chen had become more than just a teacher to Sarah. He was like the grandfather she had never had. He had worked with her every day to prepare for the conservatory audition, and he continued to give her special lessons even after she became an official student. "Sarah Martinez, you're next," Linda whispered. Sarah walked to the edge of the stage and waited for the previous student to finish her piece. When the applause died down, Linda nodded at her. Sarah walked onto the stage and the audience greeted her with warm applause. She sat down at the beautiful grand piano in the center of the stage and adjusted the bench to the right height. The concert hall became very quiet. Sarah looked out at the audience one more time and saw all the faces of people who believed in her. Her mother was crying happy tears. Mr. Chen was nodding encouragingly. Mrs. Henderson was clasping her hands together like she was praying. Sarah placed her hands on the keys and began to play the Chopin nocturne that had started everything. But tonight it sounded even more beautiful than it had that first night at Romano's. Months of proper lessons and practice had made her technique perfect, but she had not lost the emotion that made her playing special. As the music filled the concert hall, Sarah thought about the old piano at Romano's that had made this all possible. She had asked Tony if she could have it restored as a gift for the conservatory, and he had agreed immediately. The piano was now in one of the practice rooms at school, with a small gold plaque that read, "In memory of dreams that find their voice." Donated by Romano's restaurant and the friends who believed. Every day, students at the conservatory played that old piano. They did not know its story, but Sarah did. She knew that sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the most unexpected places. When Sarah finished the Chopin piece, the audience erupted in applause. But this time she was not surprised or overwhelmed. She smiled and bowed gracefully, then prepared to play her second piece. As the evening continued, Sarah played with confidence and joy. She was no longer the scared waitress who hummed while she worked. She was a real musician, sharing her gift with the world. After the concert, people crowded around Sarah to congratulate her. Her mother hugged her tightly and whispered, "I knew this day would come. I never stopped believing." Mr. Chen shook her hand formally, but his eyes were full of pride. "Sarah, this is just the beginning. You have many more beautiful performances ahead of you." Mrs. Henderson gave her a bouquet of flowers. "Thank you for letting me be part of your story, dear." Tony and the staff from Romano's were the last to greet her. "Sarah," Tony said, "you'll always have a job at my restaurant if you want it. But I think you're going to be too busy being famous." Sarah laughed. "I'll never be too busy to visit Romano's. That's where everything started." As Sarah left the concert hall that night, surrounded by people who loved and supported her, she realized that her life had become everything she had dreamed it could be. The scared, tired waitress was gone, replaced by a confident young musician with a bright future ahead. But she would never forget that magical night when a kind old man asked her to play piano. And her life changed forever. Sometimes the most important moments come when we least expect them. And sometimes the most broken-looking things are actually perfect, just waiting for the right person to bring them back to life.